Okay, so I talked a little bit in the last video about determining increases and decreases in producer and consumer surplus. And I wanted to talk a little bit about one more concept. So let's say that we have, let's see, do we want to do a tax or a price ceiling? Let's do a tax. Yeah, this is important. I don't know if I covered this in my, sorry, not a tax, in price ceiling. Did I cover this in price ceiling? I did not. This is important. Yes. So let's say, I can't believe I missed this, that we have an increase, we have a binding price ceiling. Okay, let me make it orange. Got this binding price ceiling. Okay, this is our supply, this is our demand. So as such, we'll be restricted by the lower bound. And by the way, this will create a shortage because this is your QD, this is your QS. Since quantity demanded is greater than quantity supplied, shortage. If it was on the other side, it would be a surplus. Okay. Anyways, that's just a side note. So we're restricted by the lower bound. And so this is going to be our producer surplus. And this is going to be our consumer surplus. And then we have dead weight loss right in the middle. So I'm going to draw the graph without the price ceiling, roughly, if I can draw right. Okay. So it roughly looked like that. And obviously this was your total welfare. Now your total welfare is consumer and producer surplus. It doesn't include deadweight loss. So first question I'm going to ask is what happens to total welfare in this case? Total welfare is decreasing. I think it's pretty obvious because we're losing that portion of deadweight loss. My next question is what's happening to producer surplus? Producer surplus is decreasing. I think we can all see that because it's right here and then it shrinks down to this little triangle. Let me just go down a little. So producer surplus is for sure decreasing. What about what's happening to consumer surplus? Consumer surplus is actually ambiguous here, even though you're tempted to say it's increasing, but just for the sake of what I want to get at, we're going to say it's increasing, okay? Even though it's actually ambiguous. So we're going to say it's increasing. So my question, and pause the video if this doesn't make sense. Take this slow because this is a confusing question. So stay with me, focus. Does the change in producer surplus, is the change in producer surplus bigger, smaller, or equal to the change in consumer surplus? Okay, so is the decrease in producer surplus bigger, smaller, or equal to the increase in consumer surplus? Does that make sense? Okay, so I'm going to explain this, and then I'm also going to use numbers to show this as well. The way you can figure this out is based upon total welfare. What's happening in total welfare? Total welfare is decreasing. So that means because it's decreasing, which one is bigger? Which change is bigger? The producer surplus or the consumer surplus? It has to be the producer surplus because the producer surplus is decreasing as well. So we have a really big arrow and then we have a tiny increase. And so when we add these two together, the decrease is bigger and outweighs, which causes the total welfare to be decreasing. Does that make sense? So even though consumer surplus is increasing, the change in producer surplus is significantly bigger. And the reason why this is because there's deadweight loss. So because there's deadweight loss, this market is becoming inefficient. So any loss in producer surplus has to be greater than any gain in consumer surplus. Because if there was a bigger gain, then the market would obviously do it because it's benefiting the market as a whole. There's more benefit. But because there's more loss in this case, it has to be, it's inefficient. Okay? So if this still doesn't make sense to you, we'll use numbers. So let's say total welfare was originally 10. Okay? Then it goes down to 8. Producer surplus was originally 5, and it decreases down to 2. So it's a big decrease. And then consumer surplus was also 5, and then it goes down to, or goes up to 6. So I asked which change is bigger. So let's put the change. Let me use a orange pen right there. So the change in total welfare, -2. Change in -3. And producer surplus, and then the change in consumer surplus, +1. So even though this is increasing, the change, the loss to producer surplus is bigger than the gain in consumer surplus because total welfare is decreasing. So that can always be your indicator. This is confusing, but you're going to be tested on this. You need to know this. This is important. Understanding which change is bigger. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. Finally, I'm just going to cover subsidies really fast, what you need to know, the important thing. Okay. So the subsidy is just an opposite of a tax. So normally when we draw a tax wedge, it goes right here. With the subsidy, our tax actually goes right here. Okay, and as such, this becomes your deadweight loss, this triangle. And that's the important thing. Okay, if you want to just know that, that should be all you need to know. I will go a little step further. So as it gets a little flip-flopped, as such, because this is on the demand curve, this is actually your buyer price, and then this is actually your seller price because it's on the supply curve, so I know it's flipped. And then producer and consumer surplus gets a little wonky here. So stay with me. You don't need to know this, but I'm just going to show you. Your producer surplus is this triangle. Sorry, this consumer surplus. Consumer surplus. Okay? And your producer surplus is this triangle. Now, how do you know this? I know it overlaps, so it's weird. Let me go back. If you remember the previous definition I gave, what did I say? Consumer surplus is everything above the buyer price and below the demand curve. Look, it's above the buyer price, below the demand curve. Wow, there's the triangle. And what's the producer surplus? Producer surplus is everything below the seller price and above the supply curve. So this is your triangle. Like I said, you don't need to know this. Might be good to know. But the thing you definitely need to know is where deadweight loss is. Deadweight loss is right there on a subsidy. Let me label this. Subsidy. Okay. There you go. There you have it. As always, let me know if you have any questions. Adam out.